On board, at sea, we sing familiar words to familiar tunes in unfamiliar surroundings. Chaplains tell the familiar story, the miracle of Christmas. But to us, miracles seem antiquated and far away. Tomorrow we will open a different package, the island of New Britain. Hot, humid, steeped in the exotic odor of decay. Mosquitoes king-sized will swarm over us. Spiders as big as dinner plates will crawl over us. Wasps 3 inches long will sting us. Rivers will burst their banks trying to drown us. And trees will fall, killing 20 of us. Miracles seem for the past. Our worry is the future. But although we do not know it, intelligence has misevaluated an aerial photograph and laid the groundwork for another Christmas miracle.
For the 1st Marine Division, this is our first battle since Guadalcanal. It is strangely quiet ashore, but we know they are there. They should have cut loose by this time. Must be waiting for point-blank range. They're letting us get ashore. Now they'll slaughter us. When my kid stepped on the toothpaste, the result was wider than this. You could lie with your head 3 feet into the jungle and your feet would still be in the water. So far, not a shot has been fired. No enemy encountered. We have landed with complete immunity.
With his superior knowledge of the terrain, General Matsuda had placed his limited forces with considerable shrewdness. Had the Marines known as much about the area while making their plans as they knew 1 hour after their landing, they probably would have chosen one of the beaches where they were expected. But as man projects his training, his reasoning, his background, and his experience toward ultimate effort, the 10-star general often watches over his shoulder and with positive strokes of swift certainty covers the flaws, redraws a perfect plan. The ditch at Waterloo, the opening of the Red Sea, the bridge at Remagen. At Cape Gloucester, it was faulty intelligence. Oblique photographs taken during the pre-landing bombing strikes showed hundreds of bomb craters full of water. Since there were virtually no rim shadows, it indicated a high water table at almost ground level. Today, with hindsight, we know this. Then, we did not. And the fact that we did not know it resulted in complete tactical surprise. Some would call this misinterpretation luck, others fortune. Most of us recognize it as divine guidance. On the day after Christmas, the Marines landed where they were not expected, caught General Matsuda by surprise, and split his forces without the loss of a single man.
This is our miracle. We hack, push, shove, crawl, anything to get through the jungle. And suddenly we find why the enemy did not expect us here. Damp flat, our map makers designated it. Damp flat. A bog, a quagmire, a swamp, a morass, sinkhole. Damp, clear up to your chin. This is for ducks and mermaids. There is no bottom to the goo. Imagine having to move artillery and heavy equipment through 400 yards of this. A forest giant loosened by bombardment totters, crashes, and we suffer our first marine casualty. We slip and slide through 900 yards of this. No wonder the enemy is not here to oppose our progress. He'd have to do his fighting from a canoe. Finally, one unit reaches firm footing, begins its advance toward the airfield. Enemy riflemen bar the way. Their general counterattack is swift, vicious, and lasts 4 hours. With our bazookas, we score repeated hits, and repeatedly, the projectile malfunctions. Again, nothing. The first of our daily cloudbursts arrives. There is no shelter or escape. Shoes, socks, uniforms, equipment, all are drenched and will never be fully dry until we are taken from the island many weeks hence. Now we know why the bazooka rockets do not detonate. The earth is a chocolate sponge, sucking the projectile into the mushy softness, smothering it in impotence. We need tank support. So bulldozers scrape and fill, and a road of sorts is begun. One particular bunker is giving us a bad time. Ammunition runs low, and the only vehicle able to reach us is the Amtrak. Behind us, somewhere, the road is still being gouged. We hear a snorting, a clanking, a wheezing. Someone is going to have tank support. We ready the bazooka. But it is ours. It is welcome. It is stuck. Help comes from an unexpected source. In the open, the driver exposed to enemy fire. The driver becomes a casualty. Another Marine volunteers for his job and is hit. We give the third Marine withering covering fire. And this third bears the charm. The drivers are vindicated. They have given service above and beyond. The attack moves forward.
Then began the case of the disappearing enemy. He was near. Evidence of his presence was everywhere. But somehow, Colonel Sumille managed to withdraw his troops after each engagement. The Marines could not find his real concentration of strength.
On December 28, 1943, mud and rain caved in the position of Corporal Kashida Shigeto. The good corporal had been indoctrinated to expect torture and death. Instead, he was dug out, given K-ration and a cigarette. He talked freely and indicated the presence of the 141st and 142nd Regiments.
This rocked General Rupertus, General Shepard, and their staffs back on their heels. One unit was not supposed to be on New Britain, and the other many miles away. If the corporal's information was correct, the enemy was capable of throwing greater strength into the counterattack that had been anticipated.
Patrols scout Razorback Ridge. Wherever he has done a good job of hiding. Today, he is nowhere. Tomorrow, he is everywhere, fighting. Five hours later, he withdraws and again disappears.
Where was the main body of troops? With their limited knowledge of the terrain, the Marines sent units to block any retreat. They reported no sign of withdrawal. He was still somewhere within the area. The first clue came in the form of a message sent by Japanese Lieutenant Abe. It read, "It is essential that we conceal the fact that we are maintaining positions on Aogiri Ridge." Here at last was a probable location of enemy strength. But where was Aogiri Ridge? Our own map showed two main elevations, Hill 660 and the smaller hill 150. The terrain of which his attack might come and through which ours must move was a mystery. Unusual situations demand unusual tactics, and General Shepard devised one. He proposed to hold fast on the left and center of the beach perimeter, while the right of the line redeployed and attacked generally to the southeast on a front of 1,000 yards. As the movement was begun, reaction was immediate.
For 2 days, we fight an enemy we cannot see. Artillery, mortar shells, and air bombs are almost useless. They cannot penetrate the dense forest overhead. We need tanks to spearhead us across Suicide Creek. Again, the bulldozers build a road for the tanks. But the creek banks are too steep and have to be caved in by the dozers. Again, drivers become casualties. And again, the job is finished. The first takes the plunge.
But again, the enemy withdrew. And again, we knew that Aogiri Ridge had not been found. As our lines moved forward, Hill 150 became the next suspect of Japanese strength. The 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, moved against it and secured it after surprisingly weak resistance. The invisible enemy and the location of Aogiri Ridge began to haunt the Marines. Most deductions placed it from 1,000 to 2,000 yards southwest of Hill 150.
They are wrong. We sense we have found it, but we cannot explain the reason. The ground seems level, yet it rises as we progress. We push on. Then, for 2 days, we do not advance. Efforts to flank the position fail, so the dozers build another causeway for the tanks. 1 battalion loses 2 commanding officers within 5 hours. The 3rd is destined for hand-to-hand fighting and will leave his name to mark this stubborn, violent, invisible corner of Hades where we fight. We inch forward. 1 day, 2 days, 3 unending days. 4 nightmares, 5 centuries, 6 millenniums, 7 eternities. The week's progress can be measured in feet. Attempts to encircle are stopped cold. This is Aogiri Ridge.
By now, the question was not whether the Marines could advance, but whether they could hold their hard-earned gains. It was then, in the words of the division's Special Action Report, that Colonel Walt's leadership and courage turned the tide of battle. Putting his shoulder to the wheel of a 37mm gun, he began pushing, shoving. Colonel Walt pulled both arms from their shoulder sockets, but he kept shoving. And his men, his magnificent Marines, added their strength. By superhuman effort, the gun was manhandled up the steep slope and into position to sweep the ridge. The Marines and the enemy were 30 feet apart. But as the Marines occupied one end of the ridge, so did the Japanese. Colonel Walt could hear them grouping for an attack.
4 times they banzai from only yards away. We hold our fire until the crucial moment. As they regroup for the 5th attack, we are dangerously low on ammunition. A battalion command post detail gets it through with less than 4 minutes to spare. The 5th, furious, fast-paced, final. Banzai is ended. Aogiri Ridge is ours.
At 0800, on 10 January, the Marines advanced 5 companies abreast towards the next high ground. They soon discovered why Aogiri Ridge had been so important to the enemy. Behind it lay a wide, firm, much-used trail that did not show on our maps. It had been the chief route of supply and reinforcement for the Boggan Bay area. But it was still evident that the enemy had been able to withdraw several thousand troops.
Now begins one of the war's most gigantic games of hide and seek. The enemy is retreating toward Rabaul. Somewhere in the 8,000 square mile area of western New Britain, he is fleeing. On 26 January, his main route is discovered. Ground patrols chase him to the east. Kokopo, Gorisi, Kariai, Iboki, Talawaga, Abmadan, Bulawatini, Ogitni. Trail juncture for the escaping units from Cape Merkus. They are ahead of us. Other units leapfrog up the coast.
A few seconds after the picture of this patrol in the Natoma area was taken, a Japanese machine gun, hidden by the underbrush, opened fire, killing 2 and wounding several others. If the strong enemy positions on the Willamette Peninsula could be overrun, the Marines would have an excellent interception point for all retreating units in transit between Ojetni and Numando Point. Since sea and air control were now in our hands, the move was undertaken in 38 LCMs and 17 LCVPs of the Army's 553rd Engineer Boat Battalion and 5 LCTs from the Navy. This was a daring and tricky maneuver. The small boats would have to cross 60 miles of open sea, maintain contact and position throughout the night, arriving at their objective shortly after dawn. It was born of haste and necessity. American planes were scheduled to pick up the convoy at first light.
As dawn jumps over the horizon, we look for them. None comes. We stand offshore, waiting for the aerial cover, which is to protect us until we are unloaded. None comes. Later, we will learn it is not their fault. They are weathered in. But now, we are not consoled.
But if the airmen of other services had forgotten us, our own had not.
We look up, give a mighty cheer. Marine air cover has arrived.
With complete disregard for their personal safety, Captain Theodore A. Petrus and his passenger dived through heavy enemy machine gun fire and dropped 30 grenades. It was an act of great personal bravery. However, the craters thus created scarcely impeded the Marines as they dashed ashore. Fortunately, opposition to the landing was light, and although stiff resistance developed as fighting progressed, the Marines overran the Willamette Peninsula. But once again, the invisible enemy retreated into invisibility. For the last time on New Britain, he disappeared. After 18 months, during which it had dominated all our planning, all our thinking, and all our fighting, Rabaul was now isolated. Rabaul was now impotent. Rabaul was now strategically unimportant. We did not pursue the retreating enemy. We learned from former residents of Tarawa that certain high tides would cover it with 5 feet of water. That was enough to get the landing boats across with safety to spare. We also learned that these tides were not dependable. Frequent lower tides reduced our safety factor to 2 or 3 feet. This was not enough water to float the boats over the reef. The sensible thing was to use the only vehicle we had, which was capable of crossing, regardless of depth, and that was the amphibious tractor. We were opposed in this, but we lived, slept, planned, practiced, and rehearsed amphibious landings for 20 years, and knew we had to have them. The discussion became somewhat vehement. We said, no Amtrak, no war. And they gave us 125. It wasn't enough, but it was all they could buy, borrow, or steal. We rejected the eastern end because it was too narrow to support troops and supplies. The southern beaches had the heaviest anti-boat obstacles and gun emplacements, and the western beach had all these disadvantages, plus a narrow bottleneck. Intelligence reports also indicated that safe conditions would be better inside the lagoon, which dictated our use of the northern beach. We chose the northern beaches because they offered the best chance to get ashore and gain a foothold. Also, the Japanese were still at work fortifying them, and we surmised that their approaches would not be fully mined or their underwater demolitions as thick. Later, we found this to be true. We knew there were thousands of men on the island. Some estimated 4,000, others 8,000. We knew that Tokyo had boasted that 1 million men could not take it. We knew that casualties would be high. We knew with the cold, brutal logic of war that every enemy killed by the pre-invasion fire would be one fewer to shoot at the Marines as they stormed ashore. So, at Tara, we planned a naval and air strike to knock the enemy out of his concrete bunkers, his concrete foxholes, his concrete emplacements, and his concrete reinforced underground positions. On November the 20th, 0441, when the Japanese shore batteries opened fire on the fleet, the USS Colorado and the USS Maryland swung their big guns and answered. The Battle of Batio Island, Taro Atoll, was underway.
As we board the Amtraks, which are carrying the first 3 waves into the beach, we are bewildered by the strength of the enemy fire. After the days and days of bombing and bombardment, we wonder how anyone can be alive. But someone is. The 8-inch guns captured at Singapore and transplanted here have not been silenced. 3 of the 4 spray the convoy with water and steel from near misses. To escape their fire, the convoy moves, and we mill in circles as H-hour is delayed. And then again. And a 3rd time. An hour later, the guns are finally silenced. A small minesweeper moves in to clear a path through the lagoon. And a new threat develops. High-velocity anti-tank and anti-boat guns cut loose. From this beached and gutted hulk, Japanese machine gunners spray our assault wave. We circle some more. We drive them out. Once. Twice. 3 times. Finally, we take drastic measures. One destroyer takes 2 non-fatal hits below the waterline. Smoke, intended to screen our approach from the enemy, fails. The wind is blowing from the wrong direction. Naval aviators give the island and areas near the landing beaches a final pasting. We start in. Nothing is for free at Tarawa, and although shock and concussion keeps the enemy partially off balance until the first 3 waves hit the beach, we shudder at what happens to those who follow. The 4th wave, the men in the boats, hits the reef, and the water is not 5 feet deep as advertised. They pile out and wade. They get it. They take it. But they keep coming. The pier is cleared of the enemy. 1 battalion lands on the beach and is out of contact with headquarters afloat for 24 hours. This is the beach, 12 feet wide, bounded on the north by the Friendly Island. It is enemy-led, which is killing us. On the east, by our wrecked equipment. On the west, ditto. And on the south, by the log seawall. It is excellent cover, but it is also an excellent target. Until we can surmount this wall, drive inward and secure depth of position, we have no place to unload our supplies and artillery, without which we cannot hold our beachhead.
Enemy fire had knocked out so many of the amphibious tractors that we could not mount successive assault waves. To commit any more men to landing boats and the reef would have been murder. So General Julian Smith passed the order not to move in until some of the guns had been silenced or until the cover of night and the hope of a higher tide. The handful ashore were on their own. On board the APAs, Marines seeing their buddies on this spot, cried, cursed, and beat their fist against steel gunnels in helpless protest. By some miracle, Colonel Shoup got ashore, set up communications, gained cohesion and impetus.
We inch forward. This is a new kind of war. We have fought in the jungles and swamps of Guadalcanal. But here, a rock shoots at you. You drop on the sand to dig a foxhole with your belly and hear voices underneath. A log isn't a log. It's a painted cannon barrel. A rat hole turns from black to shiny, and a lead bumblebee sings in your ear, sometimes closer. Our 37 score direct hits and bounce off. A coconut falls and turns out to be a grenade. The enemy is everywhere, above and below, in front and even behind. 4,000 of them. Late in the afternoon, a few of our medium tanks managed to reach shore.
That evening, Colonel Shoup radioed, "The issue is still in doubt." Our position was precarious. After a full day's fighting, we held only 2 tiny beach areas of less than 300 yards width and 150 yards at the point of deepest penetration. On the red beaches at the north, we held the pier, a penetration of 50 yards on the east side circle the base and 150 yards to the west. On the green beach, the 3rd Battalion was in a slightly better position, owning some 400 yards, the tactically important point, at about 175 yards of the northern beach. Some artillery had been brought ashore, but was not in use as there was no place to set it up. As night fell on D-Day, many a prayer was uttered for the safety of those ashore. Generals, admirals, officers, non-commissioned officers, and men prayed. They knew that a determined counterattack in force would probably wipe out the beachheads.
On board, we wait. Ashore, our buddies are fighting, and we who would help are helpless. There are no Amtraks to carry us to the beach. Topside, messages come in, calling for naval bombardment to break up any mass concentrations. For fighters to drop fragmentation bombs. We count the enemy gun flashes ashore. We strain to count our answering fire from the beach. It is our only way of knowing how goes the battle. With our amphibious tractors reduced to a skeleton force by enemy gunfire, with another low tide over the reef, we cannot launch another assault wave. If the Marines on the beach are driven into the sea, Tarawa will be lost. Rule 1, amphibious operations. Always have enough landing craft to put your troops ashore. And so we wait, and count the flashes, and wait. We pray, and some curse, softly, reverently, and wait.
Thanks to bombs and naval gunfire which had destroyed the enemy communications, they were never able to launch an all-out counterattack. And our boys, our magnificent Marines, had weathered all the other actions. They had held.
Hungry for lack of supper or breakfast, weary from hours of incessant conflict, thirsty from lack of water, wilted by the baking tropical sun, the Marines continue their attack at daybreak. During the night, enemy snipers and machine gunners swim out and occupy one of our wrecked Amtraks. Several Marines are hit. Then, by 12:45 of D+1, The 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, has secured all of Green Beach to a depth of 150 yards. Average advance, 6 yards per hour. 9 feet every half hour. 1 inch per minute. The 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, comes in the hard way, the long way, the slow way, but they come. By now, the artillery is in action, and the attack begins to move. Infantry teams go to work. Flamethrowers cover the infantry advance. Grenades are hurled into pockets of resistance. Planes add their support. It is a new kind of war. We write the book as we go. We creep. We crawl. We stalk and are stalked. We advance. We are pinned down. We shoot and are shot. In combat, organization breaks easily. Basic units disintegrate. On Tarawa, colonels commanded squads and were lost. And command passed down to captains, lieutenants, sergeants, corporals, even to PFCs just out of boot camp. They accepted the challenge of leadership, and they were ready.
As one went down, another leader rose to take his place. Here you see privates first class, corporal, sergeants, doing the deeds which lead them into officer training and their commissions. And having been good enlisted men, they are today good officers, good leaders who know their jobs, because they learned those jobs the hard way, the way you never forget. In the Marine Corps, we are proud of our officers who came up through the ranks.
Finally, at 3:12 on the afternoon of November 23rd, D-Day +3, Major General Julian P. Smith declared Batio Island, Tarawa Atoll secured. The 6th Marines would drive the remaining Japanese units up each vertebrae of the group and wipe them out at Buar-Iki. But Tarawa, key to the Gilberts, was ours.
Since Tarawa had to be fought, its justification was the information we gained that saved lives and increased the efficiency of our landing technique in later operations. The timing and selection of the beaches had been good. Nature and a low tide had almost wrecked us. Tarawa taught us the need for more and heavier naval gunfire and more bombings on specified targets. This Japanese command post, made of concrete and steel, covered with coconut logs and coral, withstood bombs and naval gunfire and had to be taken with bulldozers, flamethrowers, and grenades. The enemy lost 1/3 as many men in that one fortification as we lost on the entire island. Taro taught us the value of amphibian vehicles. It tested our mechanical and technical equipment as well as our landing procedure. In subsequent landings, we always had a reserve of Amtraks to get the assault waves ashore. Taro taught us that the theories and peacetime maneuvers which we had developed were sound with certain revisions.